We've got new Hunter cards, and you'll never guess what they're about. They're beast themed. Whoa, treading new ground for Hunter here. But actually, we have kind of two different angles for Hunter. Big beasts in this expansion, it looks like a little bit, and some new token beast support, which you can already see teased here behind me with Himmet. But I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of the whole package so you can see what this is about. Himmet wants you to trade in beasts, and then you get random legendaries from the past. Then you got remote control, a little weapon that summons you these hounds. You've got RC Rampage, a spell that summons you hounds that get bigger if your board is more full. You got Jungle Gem, which is kind of an arcane missiles that scales with the number of beasts that you have. And you have Painted Canvasor, who can kind of buff your wide boards of tokens with, you know, basic keywords. And we'll talk more about this as we go through each card individually. I'm not in love with this package. I think it has some awkwardness, and some of that does tie back into Himmet as a payoff. He's sort of a weird payoff because he's asking you to like trade in your board when you might otherwise want to just like create pressure out of your board. And I think some of these cards are just a little bit too old school, and they're kind of output and threat and synergy natures. But let's kick it off by talking about Himmet here a little more. Himmet Foam Marksman is a 5 mana 3/6. Not a great body to start with, frankly. Kind of weak for 5 mana. After a friendly beast dies, get a random legendary beast from the past, and that beast costs 2 less. And if you look at the beast pool that is available, and this includes some new beasts as well, it's a real mixed bag, I would say. You know, sometimes you're gonna have just like okay stats because of the cost discount. Even Subject 9, something where, you know, you probably don't have the synergies for secrets for this or whatever, it's a 3 mana 4/4, which not good by any means. You wouldn't just run that for the sake of it, but it's not going to be a disaster ever. And then there are still going to be like some, you know, some crazy high rolls here and there where things either just line up really nicely, or, you know, just a 5 mana 9/9 with a positive effect on Swamp King Dread. Like, that's really good, right? You're going to be super excited to see that. You know, I don't know, King Mosh, 7 mana 9/7 with upside. You know, it's cool big stuff does exist. At the same time, you're also going to get a lot of like Subject 9s and Knuckles and you know, what, Arthas. I don't think Arthas holds up well as a 2 mana 2/2. The Lich King cards just aren't really that good anymore. A handful are okay, a handful are bad. So, you know, some disappointing results, some solid results. You know, Chameleos, Zavas is, you know, 0 mana 2/2. You're not gonna be excited about that, right? It's like, okay, whatever. 0 mana 2/2 is fine, but you're not pumped. Do keep in mind, by the way, Halazi the Lynx, crazy synergy with Himmet here. Also, just a card I want you to keep in mind as we take a look at the rest of these cards, because this right here fills your hand with lynxes that have rush, and just keep that in mind. So anyway, with Himmet, right, I think the results are going to feel solid most of the time. If you're able to trade in 3+ beasts, you're going to get a decent little set of stuff in hand. And again, the cost discount's doing all the work there, because if it was just like random full cost stuff, you wouldn't care at all. It'd be awful. But the problem is, you know, you have to play Himmet, and he's just a 5 mana 3/6, and that's really bad. So you're kind of taking this downturn in hopes that you'll recover a little bit of that tempo sacrifice, mana sacrifice on turn 5. You hope you recover it later with all the beasts you got off Himmet. I don't know that they're going to feel strong enough to be recovery cards. Just playing like a 3 mana 4/4, for instance, sometimes, that's not enough to recover. That's just a solid turn. It's just an okay result, and you'd be happy to do it maybe if you didn't sacrifice a whole turn, or didn't maybe sacrifice a board of minions that you perhaps weren't all that excited to trade in. So, in other words, this requires a lot of setup, because you got to have this board that's built, you got to spend this 5 mana on Himmet, and you got to trade, which often hunters don't want to trade anyway, especially if they're playing like an aggressive kind of tokeny deck. That makes me nervous. So to me, the payoff here just does not seem to match the sort of investment from a cost, from a board standpoint. It feels like it's too much. Maybe even from a deck building standpoint, you have to invest quite a bit to make this work. And I think most results are going to feel average. Occasionally, yes, you'll high roll into something crazy and feel nuts about it. At the same time, occasionally you'll low roll and feel like you just completely wasted like 2 turns or whatever. trying to make Hemet work. So I don't know if most decks are going to be able to afford that. I can kind of see this as like a Hail Mary, like top end of an aggro deck where it's like, hey man, I just need another wave of threats. I need stuff to maybe close this game out. So maybe I'll just toss in a Hemet and hope to, you know, hit a King Crush or whatever to end the game. I don't know. I'd rather just run damage, run a Leroy or something in that spot instead, maybe, and you're happier. So to me, this looks a little iffy. I also think I'm sad that this is clearly using a Nerf gun, the Foam Marksman. I wish he did something like nerfing your opponent's cards. How cool would that be if he like increased the cost of all cards in your opponent's hand by 1 permanently, as if they were all nerfed or something, right? I don't know, that may not be balanced. Don't take that example to heart, but you get the idea. Some kind of nerf themed effect, but this is still a really fun effect. Just, I don't think it's going to be very good. So moving on to some of these token generators, these don't have to exist in a Hemet world, right? These can be their own thing separately, which is kind of my guess. If they do work, they're probably going to work without Hemet better than with Hemet. I don't think you need the Hemet necessarily to pay these off. Remote Control is a 2-mana 1/3 after your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 Hound. As you can see here, the Hound does not have any base keyword like Rush, which I'm sad about. We've seen plenty of Hunter tokens in the past that had Rush. I mean, Halazi came out in Rostakon's Rumble, and you got a handful of Lynxes with Rush. And then we had like Locusts in Saviors of Uldum, and those had Rush. And this just feels like a major step backwards to me. They are a mech, so there's some like magnetic stuff there to play with a little bit maybe. And of course, there's going to be some beast synergies as we saw, like giving these keywords and stuff. But that's just like an extra step to get to the kind of the same place you were before, particularly when like you got stuff you want to be trading in. You know, Rush seems to make so much sense because with him you want to trade in, and frankly with a jungle gem sometimes you're going to want to be able to trade stuff in because this is going to deal damage to minions. It's going to leave some behind at like 1 or 2 health or whatever. It'd be really nice to trade things in afterwards, and these RC Hounds just kind of sit there dead. So that makes me nervous. The Remote Control also being a 1 attack card here feels a little bit challenged. That just doesn't clean things up in the early game like it used to. I'd almost prefer this was a 2/2 and I get 1 less Hound, just so that 2 attack can like better trade into the board early and keep things in check. I'm worried this 1/3 is not going to do quite enough work, and you'll often just be kind of hitting face, which, you know, 3 bonus damage doesn't hurt. 3 minions for 2 mana is not bad by any means, but it is kind of delayed. It is sort of just sitting there susceptible. So I don't know, man, some challenges on this. It just feels a little bit too honest. It feels a little bit too old school when so many cards these days cheat, which, you know, I don't mind from a design perspective. Like I do long for lower power leveled cards in many ways, but that doesn't make it competitive against some of the crazy stuff we've seen in recent eras. So next up here, we have the RC Rampage, and I think this is a little more hopeful, particularly in combination with a jungle gym here. Like you play the jungle gym down on 2, you load this up, and then you make a monster board on turn 4, and you hit the jungle gym button, of course, and you get yourself pretty nice, like, you know, little Astalor style effect, basically dealing 7 damage here off the jungle gym, which could maybe help you swing on board a little bit, you know, clean up your opponent's minions. Sadly, I think there will be a lot of board states where it doesn't clean up the minions, and you leave behind like a couple 3/1s or whatever, and you desperately wish these had Rush, even though they don't. Maybe your weapon's still lingering around. I don't know. It's just, it seems like there's going to be some awkwardness there. Of course, if it's on an empty board, you might not hate pushing 7 damage to face either, because this can indeed hit face. So this is kind of a cool little line, you know, if you line up the Remote Control and the jungle gym and the RC Rampage, if it lines up perfectly, there's probably something there. But as soon as there's any missteps or things don't go well, or you miss the jungle gym, this all starts to fall apart really quickly for me, because I don't think summoning the 6/1/1 Hounds here at a base feels very good. It's just too susceptible. It's too hard to use these. 1/1s just die for free to so many different things. Jungle gyms, for instance, they just get wiped out. So many cheap little AoEs, right? You've made quite an investment here, and it just gets dealt with. Now, of course, this has the bonus tax. Any that can't fit give the others +1/+1. So if you do have a big board already, if you got a few things lingering around when you play this, you do get to build some nicer, higher threatening minions, which is good. You know, 2/2s even are a lot more sturdy than 1/1s, and 3/3s start becoming real meaningful threats. Not that scary on turn 4, but, you know, still chunkier. They don't just die for free to everything. But then that's kind of a win more scenario. Like, this card's only good when I'm already ahead. And did I stay ahead? How did I get that far ahead on board? How do I have so many minions left over, right? A lot of questions to answer there. And then two, it's like if I do have a big board, I almost wish I could just leverage it with pressure. You know, Token Druid is like, hey, I built the board, now I'm gonna buff it, I'm gonna hit you, I'm gonna just try to kill you really quickly. This is like, I built the board and now I'm going to build even more board, but it doesn't like accelerate into anything crazy, and I don't think it's going to create so much pressure that people just fall over to it. So I don't know, man. If I get some RC hounds sticking, I'd almost really like magnetize stuff to them than just make more RC hounds. So there's still just some clunkiness in this, and to me, honestly, it still just feels like it's a bit too straightforward, a bit too old school. I wish it did a little bit more. So next up is Jungle Gym, and I do think this is one of the more rewarding aspects of all this, because this is 2 mana, 3 durability. That means you're getting quite a few, you know, button presses on this. It's probably true that you're not doing it on turn 2, so these are kind of delayed button presses. You're probably at best hitting it on like 3, but maybe more realistically like turn 4, and then turn 6, and then turn 8. It's coming down pretty late, but there could be kind of that critical mass where you kind of turn the corner, you get a big enough board, finally you start pulling ahead, and this becomes maybe like a lethal threat, because it is sort of, if you squint really, really hard, it looks like Astalor, right? And it's like, okay, I'm gonna finally have this big board and kind of try to kill the opponent off of it, which is nice, and it can be swingy on board too in that mid game, like we talked about with the RC Rampage. So this does feel pretty good for only 2 mana. I don't know that you want to have to, you know, build into this whole package for it though, and there are still going to be plenty of turns and scenarios where this doesn't really feel like it lined up all that well, particularly because it's like, okay, I need to build the board the turn I'm off the button, and then by the time the button's back on, you know, the opponent wiped out the board, and it's just going to be this kind of back and forth sometimes that just feels clunky and awkward. So this is nice, but it does demand very specific support, and I'm not convinced by the support that it demands. So finally, the Painted Canvasor. This is pretty cool. This is sort of like the old Unguro beast, the Crackling Razor Maw, I believe he was called. I just pulled that name right out of my butt, so I hope that's right. Days when I remember card names a little better back then. But he does affect every beast on board, not just a single beast. That said, the random bonus effects, I would argue, are on average worse than the adaptations that the Razor Maw had. I don't know if that's totally true. Some of those were pretty nice, like stat buffs and stuff. And this is, you know, you're going to get some like taunts, you know, etc., that don't really feel all that useful. Perhaps on the Canvasor here, you're going to get some nice like divine shields on occasion that feel pretty good, but everything else is going to be rough. And the fact that it's so unpredictable too, you don't get to discover it, is really a downside, because it's like, oh man, I have a big beast on board. I really want to give it Wind Fury to kill the opponent, and it's like, oh, I have such a low chance to actually get a meaningful keyword. I'm gonna get taunt. Crap. Or I got lifesteal when I don't need that. I need lethality. I don't need lifesteal right now. And when you need lifesteal, you're gonna get something else than lifesteal. So, you know, it's better when you have a wide board, because you can get a nice mix, and, you know, you're more likely to get a roll on something that you really desperately need. So it does play into the RC Hound side of things, sort of, but also those are often going to be just 1/1s, and a 1/1 with Divine Shield is not that scary. A 1/1 with lifesteal, it's not that useful. So this helps turn those wide boards into more threateningness, but it's still not that stat buff that you're looking for, that both increases survivability and lethality. It's utility buffs, which I think, you know, are harder to actually find that utility most of the time. So unfortunately, I do think this is, again, one of the better kind of payoffs for all this package, but I'm not convinced it's enough to get it there. So next up, let's talk about kind of some general use Hunter cards here, because these actually look pretty good, and I don't want you to think all the Hunter cards suck. Regis hates Hunter. You guys always say that. I don't hate anything. I just, you know, read the cards as they are. Patchwork Pals, though, looks pretty good. This is a 2-mana spell. It gives you all 3 animal companions, and they cost 1 less, which is pretty nice. The animal companions actually already felt a little bit cheaper than they were supposed to at 3. You know, a 4/4 taunt back in the day when that first got printed should not cost 3. That's like almost a 4-mana card, right? So now you get them even cheaper, right? 2 mana each. The animal companions are pretty nuts. You know, a 4/2 Huffer for 2 mana is really cool. 2 mana 4/4 taunt. Hey, that's not bad. And Leok in particular can be a huge payoff for a wide board. Like, that's finally a way to actually create some damage. Fortunately, it does demand you give up 2 mana in a deck that might value playing for tempo a little bit more. Making sure they stay ahead on board is pretty important in that sort of game plan. So I don't know if it fits that well, but theoretically anyway, Leok is a nice payoff. So you know, this is essentially a good little value generator where you give up a bit of mana. You know, you're probably not really excited to play this on turn 2, but maybe weave this in a little bit later, just making sure, you know, you can put together a cool like turn 6 or turn 7 where you mix together a Huffer and a Leok and you have maybe a minion or 2 on board, and that suddenly generates some sort of lethal pressure or outs. I don't know if this card would be worth it if you didn't get lethality out of it, because you're getting, you know, nice Huffer damage, nice Leok bonus damage. That gives it that edge, and, you know, maybe throw a Misha in the meantime just to build a little bit of board too. So if it wasn't for that, I don't, you know, if this was just 3 random, you know, 3 mana beasts or whatever, wouldn't say it was worth it. But the fact that you're getting specific cards that you know you can use in specific scenarios actually makes this look pretty good to me. Just a nice little value bomb of good, efficient cards. So next up is Fetch, and this is a pretty cool little 2 mana spell. It allows you to draw a minion, and then if it's a beast, you draw a spell. And if you're playing this card, you're going to be like 100% sure that it's a beast outside of any shenanigans, you know. But normally you'd build your deck to have all beasts to make sure that the minion you hit guarantees this card connects and also draws you a spell. And then you get a 2 mana, draw 2, and you get a nice little mix of stuff. You get a minion that might be a threat, and you get a spell that might be, you know, some like reactivity or whatever, or support for the minion. So you know you're getting you know, things that adapt to various game states. Or if you build your deck right, you could get very specific things. We have, you know, just a couple spells or a single spell or a single minion or a couple key minions, so that you know you're tutoring exactly specific things for whatever game plan. So that just looks good, right? Tutors, efficient card draw, targeted draw, a little bit of a deck building requirement, but not really, because there's so many beasts in Hunter. It's probably not much of a challenge at all. So yeah, some decks won't run this, but there can be plenty of others that do and find it very useful. So moving on to our 2 final cards here. This is one that got revealed a while ago, like on social media accidentally or something. It wasn't accidental, I guess, but it's just earlier than other Hunter cards. It's the Mystery Egg, a 5 mana 0/3 with Miniaturize and Death Rattle. Get a copy of a random beast in your deck that costs 5 less. So ideally, you know, you build your deck with big beasts, and we're going to see another big beast here to keep in mind as well, the Toy Ranosaurus. Big old 7/6 with Rush and a cool Death Rattle. So, you know, you want to get a big beast and cheat it into play early. So you got the King Plush, remember, the big old 6/6 with Charge that has kind of a Psychic Scream of sorts built into it for things that are smaller than it. That could be a big payoff. The Toy Ranosaurus could be a big payoff. And then you got the miniaturized side of this too, the mini, you know, 1/1 version. This one in particular is very easy to weave in. You know, you can actually trade this off as a 1/1, so you know it's going to activate a bit more reliably. So, you know, turn 5 and then turn 6, you're getting some really cheap beasts. So maybe, you know, you play this on turn 5. I don't know if it's actually going to die. Like, your opponent's not going to usually kill it for you, but there is some hand buff stuff maybe you can use to get this in a spot where it's able to trade in. So you trade it in on turn 6, you play whatever cheap beast you got, and then maybe play the mini alongside it, so that the mini kind of sets you up for turn 7. So you have kind of a couple turns in a row of like cheated big beasts. My challenge though is just like, you're spending 5 mana on such a dud of a minion that I think sometimes is going to be really hard to activate. Or if you do activate it easily, you might have to build your deck around a little bit with Death Rattle activations, with buffs of some sort, which delays the payoff often, because you know, if you have to like buff this afterwards or Death Rattle activated afterwards, you might have to spend mana on turn 6 for that, which means maybe you don't play the beast until turn 7. It just starts pushing all of this back quite a bit, when the whole point of cheating these things into play early is getting out ahead of your opponent and overwhelming them with these giant things. It's not often about just efficiency of you know, a big cheap thing. Like, yes, a 2 mana Toy Ranosaurus is very efficient, but you also sometimes need to get it down early enough for it to make that swing and make that impact and like kind of stick around and be a threat. Because even really efficient things coming down too late give your opponent time to, you know, find the removal, to find lethals against you, and just push their game plan too far. So my fears for this one is really just from a speed and activation standpoint, but the effect is definitely really nice when it works. And then finally here we have the Toy Ranosaurus, and I actually really like this card. I think this is like just good. I don't know, it's nothing too flashy or fancy, but I think it's probably better than we think at first glance. It's a 7 mana 7/6 beast with Rush, and Death Rattle deal 5 damage to a random enemy. And I think that Death Rattle does a lot of the work here, because I think there will be plenty of instances where your opponent has kind of one big thing on board. You know, Titan comes to mind, for instance, where you just happily trade in a Toy Ranosaurus, and hopefully it's a clean trade. Sometimes the Titans it wouldn't be, but you know, whatever, big minions on board. and you deal 5 to the enemy face. And as a hunter, you don't hate it, right? You just get a trade, clean up the board, and get some chip damage, and hopefully you're whittling your opponent down, presenting some, you know, lethal scenario opportunities. And then you got various big beast synergies to kind of help cheat this into play or whatever, to make it all efficient and make it happen faster. That seems like a line of play that's going to connect. Now, I don't know if that's going to connect right away. You know, we might need to hit more big beast package things to support this, but I feel like this is just lying in wait as a cool little card. Sometimes too, you know, just trade into a big thing and kill a 5/5 on board, right? There's going to be scenarios where it just feels good to do this. It's just a big pile of stats and a little bit of pressure, and it's got that immediate reactivity with rush. I like all those things. So it's not flashy, it's not fancy, it's not even crazy, but I think it's just pretty solid, and I feel like this is going to find a home. So now let's do some quick reviews. Hemet Foam Marksman is a 2-star card. Remote Control is a 2-star card. RC Rampage is a 3-star card. Jungle Gym is a 3-star card. Painted Canvasor is a 3-star card. Mystery Egg is a 2-star card. Tyrannosaurus is a 4-star card. Patchwork Pals is a 4-star card. Fetch is a 4-star card. And there you go, Hunter stuff. Not my favorite set of the expansion so far. I liked King Plush a lot, just not convinced by this token stuff. I'm curious if you guys like it more than me, but I was just thinking, like, remember that weapon from Old Doom that summoned you the Locust? Like comparing these, where is that thing? Let's see. Hold up. Wait, I need to find this. Hold up. Sorry, this is a funny aside. What's it? I revealed this card. I remember this card because I revealed it. Yeah, Desert Spear, right? Desert Spear. After your attack, summon a 1/1 Locust with Rush, right? This is only 1 mana more, right? But you get 3 Rush Locusts instead of just 3 Hound Locusts, which, I mean, maybe Mech is doing a lot of work here. Maybe this 1 mana is doing a lot of work, but I'd also like to remind you, this card is like 6 years old or something. Maybe 5 years old. Does this feel like 5 years of advancement? Like the game has power crept like crazy over 5 years. We have such absurd things now. This does not feel like 5 years of it. It feels like a step back, honestly, to me. So I don't know, dude. I just am not in love with this package for whatever reason. I just can't. I can't buy into it just yet. I hope somebody proves me wrong, though. Make something cool, do something crazy. These are awfully cute little hounds, so I hope to see them more. Maybe the mech side will do a lot of work, and that's not what we're anticipating. So who knows? Anyway, share your thoughts on these. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.